What if your greatest hidden strength was mistaken for a weakness? Rose Patterson was a waitress so shy she barely spoke. She was invisible. But when billionaire Marcus Thorne and his elegant, silent mother sat at her table, the entire restaurant held its breath. The billionaire's date mocked the older woman, trying to order for her like a child. But then, Rose did something no one expected. She looked past the billionaire, past the money, and spoke a language that left the entire room in stunned silence. This isn't just a story about sign language. It's a story about what happens when the most underestimated person in the room holds the one secret that can change everything. The restaurant, Aperture, was a place where silence was an ingredient. It wasn't the quiet of a library. It was the expensive, heavy silence of old money, broken only by the respectful clink of silver on porcelain, and the murmur of conversations costing more than a monthly salary. For Rose Patterson, this silence was both a comfort and a cage. Rose was, by nature, a creature of the quiet. She was 24, with a pale face and large, observant eyes that seemed to take in everything while giving nothing away. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a severe regulation bun, and her uniform was pressed, but it hung on her slightly, as if she were trying to shrink away inside it. She was the restaurant's most efficient waitress, yet the least seen. She anticipated needs before they were spoken, a refilled water glass, a discreetly replaced napkin, allowing her to drift between tables like a ghost. Her manager, Mr. Davies, a man with a perpetually pinched face and a starched collar, approved of her efficiency, but despised her shyness. "Speak up, Patterson," he'd hiss during line-up. "You look like a frightened mouse. Our clientele expects confidence." Rose would just nod, her throat tightening. Confidence was a luxury she couldn't afford. Confidence required a voice, and Rose had long ago given hers away. Her life was a small, predictable loop. The pre-dawn walk to the bus, the long shift at Aperture, the bus ride back to her tiny fifth-floor walk-up, and the lukewarm meal she'd eat while studying. She was enrolled in online courses at a community college, slowly chipping away at a degree in linguistics. It was a faint echo of her original dream, the one she'd had before, the one that died with her brother. Tonight, the loop felt tighter. Her rent was due. The sole of her left work shoe was starting to peel away, and the A-frame sign for Aperture seemed to mock her. Openness, clarity, focus. She felt closed, opaque, and scattered. "Patterson!" Davies barked, snapping her out of her reverie. "Table 4 is the Thorne party. Do not mess this up. This is Marcus Thorne." Rose's blood ran cold. The Marcus Thorne. Thorne Industries, the man whose name was plastered on half the new buildings in the city. A man who, according to the tabloids, ate lesser mortals for breakfast. "And he has his mother," Davies added, his lip curling. "The old woman. Just be discreet. Focus on Mr. Thorne. Get his order, get it right, and get out." Rose nodded, her palms instantly damp. She gripped her silver tray, the metal cold against her skin, and took a deep, shaky breath. Discreet. She could do discreet. She was the invisible girl. This would be fine. She turned, tray balanced, and began the long walk across the plush carpet toward Table 4, the most exclusive booth in the restaurant, unaware that her entire life was balanced on the precipice of a single gesture. Table 4 was set apart, a semicircular booth upholstered in deep crimson velvet, offering privacy and a panoramic view of the city lights. As Rose approached, she could feel the energy radiating from it, not warmth, but intensity. Marcus Thorne was exactly as the papers described him, and yet nothing like them. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 35. His suit was a shade of charcoal, so dark it was almost black, tailored so perfectly it seemed fused to his broad shoulders. He had dark hair, a strong jaw, and eyes that were a piercing, intelligent blue. He wasn't looking at the menu. He was looking at his phone, his thumb swiping with a short, agitated motion. Seated beside him, squeezed into the booth, was a woman Rose recognized from the society pages, Brenda Van Sloan. She was all sharp angles and expensive diamonds, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed. She was talking at Marcus, her voice a low, insistent hum. And then Rose saw her. Opposite Marcus sat the woman Davies had called the old woman. She was anything but. Genevieve Thorne was perhaps in her late 60s, but she possessed an ageless, porcelain elegance. Her silver hair was coiled in a graceful twist, and she wore a simple, dark blue dress. But it was her eyes that held Rose. They were the same piercing blue as her son's, but where his were restless and sharp, hers were deep, calm, and profoundly observant. She wasn't speaking. She wasn't even looking at the menu. She was watching the other diners with a quiet, almost melancholic curiosity. She was also, as Rose knew from a single, sad news article she'd read years ago, profoundly deaf. "Good evening," Rose whispered, her voice barely a thread of sound. Marcus didn't look up from his phone. Brenda paused her story, gave Rose a dismissive once-over, and then waved a manicured hand. "We'll have a bottle of the Sancerre, the 09, and bring some bread." "Of course," Rose murmured. As she turned to leave, she saw Genevieve Thorne's hands move. They rose from her lap, fingers forming a small, quick shape against her chest. It was a simple, hesitant sign. "Water." Rose froze. It was a flicker, so fast, but she knew it. It was the same sign her younger brother, Leo, used to make when he woke up from a nightmare, his throat too dry to cry. Before Rose could react, Marcus finally looked up, his gaze sweeping past her. "Mother," he said, his voice loud and clipped, as if speaking to a child. "We are ordering wine. You'll have your water." He motioned to Rose. "Get her a water. Still. No ice." Genevieve's hands dropped back into her lap. A shadow, brief as a blink, crossed her face. She looked down, her composure locking back into place. Rose felt a small, hot pinprick of anger in her chest. It was so familiar. The dismissal, the assumption, the casual erasure of a person's voice simply because it was silent. She remembered Leo, hiding in his room after their father told him to just try to speak normally. Rose nodded, her face impassive. "Right away, sir." She retrieved the wine, her hands shaking slightly. She presented the bottle to Brenda, who sniffed the cork and nodded. Rose poured, her movements practiced and economical. She placed the water glass gently in front of Genevieve. When she did, her sleeve brushed a fork. Genevieve looked up, startled. Their eyes met. Rose instinctively gave her a small, tight-lipped smile. Genevieve's eyes widened, just a fraction. She held Rose's gaze, her head tilted, as if seeing something no one else had. "We're ready to order," Brenda announced, snapping the menu closed. The tension at the table was thick enough to cut. Marcus was back on his phone, conducting a clipped, hushed conversation. "I don't care what the zoning board says. Buy the block. Yes, the whole block." Brenda ignored, turned her attention to the menu with a sigh of manufactured boredom. She was the kind of customer who studied a menu as if looking for flaws in a legal document. Rose stood with her pen poised over her notepad, practicing the art of invisibility. "I'll have the halibut," Brenda declared, "but the sauce on the side. And the risotto is made with vegetable stock, correct? I'm gluten intolerant and dairy free." "The risotto is made with chicken stock and finished with butter and parmesan, ma'am, Rose said softly. Perhaps the quinoa pilaf instead? Brenda sighed. Fine, the pilaf. But make sure it's not cross-contaminated. Marcus snapped his phone shut and tossed it on the table. Right. Sorry. He looked at Rose, but his eyes were a million miles away. I'll have the New York strip, medium rare, and a bottle of the Cabernet, the 82. A very good choice, sir, Rose murmured, making the note. And for my mother, Marcus gestured vaguely across the table. Genevieve was watching her son, her expression unreadable. She'll have the sea base, steamed, no sauce, and a side of asparagus. Rose paused. Her pen hovered. Genevieve Thorne's hands had moved again, unseen by her son, who was already reaching for his wine. Her fingers were tight. One hand made a fist, tapping it twice against her chin. Sea base. Then her face contorted in a subtle, almost imperceptible sign of disgust, and she signed the word hate. She hated sea base. Brenda, however, had seen. She let out a small, tinkling laugh. Oh, Marcus, let her have what she wants. It's so cute when she tries to order. She turned to Genevieve, and, in a grotesquely slow and exaggerated voice, shouted, Do you want the fish? Genevieve flinched, not at the sound, but at the spittle and the patronizing stare. A deep flush rose on her pale neck. She looked humiliated. Marcus shot Brenda a warning look. She's fine. She likes the sea base. He looked at Rose. That's all. Rose looked from Marcus's impatient face to Brenda's cruel smirk, and then to Genevieve, who had shrunk into herself, her eyes fixed on the white tablecloth. And in that moment, Rose wasn't the shy waitress. She wasn't the invisible girl. She was Leo's big sister. She was the only person in a world of noise who had ever bothered to listen to his silence. Her training, her fear, the rent check, Mr. Davies, it all evaporated. There was only this one, elegant, silenced woman. Rose took one step forward, placing herself directly in Genevieve's line of sight. She ignored Marcus. She ignored Brenda. She lifted her hands. Her movements were not the clumsy, hesitant gestures of a novice. They were fluid, sharp, and grammatically perfect. The shyness in her posture vanished, replaced by a sudden, shocking confidence. She signed, in perfect, rapid American Sign Language. Good evening, Mrs. Thorne. My name is Rose. Please forgive my intrusion. Your son ordered the sea bass, but I saw you sign. Is there something else you would prefer? The effect was instantaneous. Brenda's condescending smile froze, then shattered. Her mouth fell open. Marcus Thorne's head snapped up, his blue eyes narrowing in sheer, unadulterated disbelief. He looked at Rose's hands, then at his mother's face, as if he couldn't process the data. But the most profound reaction came from Genevieve. Her head ached from the vibrations of Brenda's shouting. She was used to being treated as a beautiful, broken ornament, trotted out for dinners, spoken at, ordered for. She'd spent 2 decades in a silent world, observing, learning to read the human heart through the flicker of an eye, the tense set of a jaw. She knew her son loved her, but his love was a smothering, controlling thing. He thought he was protecting her, but he was just building a more comfortable cage. And then, this slip of a girl, this waitress she'd dismissed as a shadow, had spoken. Not in the loud, slow, insulting way of the hearing, but in Genevieve's own language, with a fluency that was native, a grace that was respectful. Genevieve's eyes flooded with tears. She raised her own hands, which were shaking. You sign? She signed back, her movements rusty from lack of use with a stranger. Rose's expression softened. She signed slowly, respectfully, Yes, ma'am. Since I was a child. What would you truly like to eat? The chef's special tonight is a pan-seared scallop with a butternut squash risotto. It's excellent. A small, choked laugh escaped Genevieve's lips. Her hands flew, the signs becoming more complex, more her. My God, I despise sea bass. I have despised it since 1985. Marcus just forgets. She glanced at her son, then back at Rose. Scallops. That sounds divine. And tell me, is the Sancerre any good? I much prefer it to Cabernet. What is she saying? Marcus's voice was a low growl. He wasn't angry. He was unmoored. The foundation of his world had just shifted. Rose kept her eyes on Genevieve, giving her the respect of a primary conversation, but she spoke for Marcus to hear. Mrs. Thorne says she detests sea bass. She would like the pan-seared scallops with the risotto, and she would prefer a glass of the Sancerre you're having, not the Cabernet. She then turned back to Genevieve and signed. He seems surprised. Genevieve's hands flashed a wry comment. He's always surprised when I have an opinion. Thank you, dear. Thank you. Rose nodded. Your food will be out shortly, Mrs. Thorne. She turned, her professional mask back in place, and picked up the tray. As she walked away, she could feel the weight of their stares. Brenda's was a laser beam of pure hatred. Marcus's was something else entirely, a complex, burning mixture of confusion, awe, and intense, penetrating curiosity. In the kitchen, her hands were trembling so badly she could barely clip the order to the line. What's wrong, Patterson? The chef grunted. Nothing, Rose whispered, leaning against the cold stainless steel. I think I just spoke. The silence in the dining room, the heavy, expensive silence, had been broken, and Rose Patterson had been the one to do it. For the rest of the meal, the dynamic at table 4 was irrevocably altered. Brenda Van Sloan was sullen, sipping her wine in sharp, angry gulps. She had been rendered irrelevant, and she knew it. Marcus, however, was transformed. He put his phone away. He watched Rose every time she approached the table to refill water or clear a plate. But mostly, he watched his mother. Genevieve was radiant. She ate her scallops with visible, unadulterated pleasure. She engaged with Rose every chance she got, signing small questions. Where are you from? Is the chef always this good? And Rose would sign back a polite, discreet answer. For the first time that night, Genevieve Thorne was not an accessory. She was the center of her own experience. When Rose brought the check, Marcus signed it without looking at the total. Patterson, he said, his voice quiet but commanding. Wait by the coat check. I need a word with you. Rose's blood turned to ice. Mr. Davies's warning echoed in her ears. Do not mess this up. Had she overstepped? Had she broken some sacred rule of the wealthy by acknowledging the silent woman? Brenda, overhearing, stood up so quickly her chair nearly toppled. Marcus, darling, the car is waiting. This waitress can't possibly have anything to say to you. Brenda, wait in the car, Marcus said. It was not a request. The steel was back in his voice. Brenda's face paled. She gave Rose a look that could curdle milk, grabbed her fur stole, and stormed out of the restaurant. Rose waited by the massive oak doors of the coat check, her apron twisted in her hands. Mr. Davies was watching her from across the dining room, his face a thundercloud. Marcus approached, but his mother was with him. Genevieve walked right up to Rose, and, ignoring her son, took Rose's small, chapped hands in her own. Thank you, Genevieve signed, her eyes shining. You gave me back my voice tonight. It was an honor, ma'am, Rose signed back, a lump forming in her throat. How? Marcus's voice was rough. Not what, but how. Your fluency is. It's not from a class. It's native. Rose looked down at her hands, at the hands that had been her brother's only connection to the world. My younger brother, Leo, she said, her voice barely audible. He was born deaf. My parents, they never learned. They thought it was a phase, something he'd grow out of, that if they yelled enough, he'd hear. She swallowed, the memory still raw. But he was my best friend. So I learned. I checked out books from the library. We made up our own signs. When I was older, I took every ASL class I could find. It was our language, our secret world. Was? Marcus asked gently. He got sick, Rose whispered, the old grief surfacing. Meningitis, it was fast. He was 16, I was 20. He died 2 years ago. She wiped at her eye, angry at the tear. I was at Columbia, studying linguistics, specializing in sign development. I had to drop out. The medical bills, the funeral. Now I work here. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the cold silence of the restaurant. It was a silence of shared, profound weight. Marcus looked at this shy, trembling girl and saw for the first time the steel spines beneath. He saw the grief, the sacrifice, and the quiet, unyielding strength. He'd been surrounded by people like Brenda his whole life, people who took. He was looking at someone who had given everything. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a thick black business card. It was embossed with a single name, Marcus Thorne. I'm so sorry, sir, Rose stammered, thinking she was being fired. I didn't mean to overstep. I couldn't stand the way. You did nothing wrong, Rose, he said, and the use of her first name startled her. You did everything right. He pressed the card into her hand. This is my private number. I want to talk to you about what you did. Not as a waitress, but as a linguist, as an expert. He paused, his blue eyes searching her face. I'll be blunt. I've been trying to connect with my mother for 20 years. You did it in 20 seconds. I want to know how. He and Genevieve turned and left. Rose stood, stunned, the impossibly heavy card warming in her palm. She was so dazed she didn't see Mr. Davies watching from the shadows. She also didn't see Brenda Van Sloan, who had been watching the entire exchange through the restaurant's glass doors, her face a mask of pure, calculated fury. The next 2 days were a blur. Rose existed in a state of suspended disbelief. She looked at the black business card on her nightstand a dozen times, but she couldn't bring herself to call. What would she say? Hi, Mr. Billionaire. It's the waitress you met. What's up? It felt like a dream, and she was terrified of waking up. At Aperture, the atmosphere had changed. Mr. Davies was icily polite, which was more terrifying than his usual barking. He assigned her to the back of house, polishing silver, far from the VIP tables. Rose was relieved, but also unsettled. She felt like a storm was gathering just over the horizon. She was right. On Wednesday night, Brenda Van Sloan returned. She wasn't dining. She arrived just as the restaurant was closing, sweeping in like a gale. I've been robbed, she announced to Mr. Davies, her voice carrying across the now empty dining room. Rose, who was stacking bread baskets, froze. My diamond bracelet, Brenda said, her hand fluttering to her wrist. It was a family heirloom. I was sitting right there, at table 4, when I was here with Marcus. That waitress, the one with the hands. She kept hovering. Ms. Van Sloan, Davies said, his voice oozing false sympathy. That is a very serious allegation. It was her, Brenda insisted. She was probably jealous. Poor little thing. I bet she thought she could sell it, buy herself a new life. Check her locker. I demand you check her locker." "Patterson!" Davies roared. Rose stumbled out of the kitchen, her heart pounding a sick rhythm against her ribs. "Yes, Mr. Davies?" "Miss Van Sloan has accused you of stealing her diamond bracelet. We are going to have to search your personal belongings." "What? No! I would never!" Rose looked at Brenda, who was examining her nails with a look of bored triumph. Rose knew instantly what was happening. This wasn't about a bracelet. This was about Marcus. This was about the sign language. "I didn't take anything," Rose insisted, her voice shaking. "You can search me, search my bag." "Oh, we will," Davies said, sneering. He led the way to the staff lockers in the cramped hallway by the kitchen. He had a set of master keys. He bypassed Rose's simple padlock, opening her locker. And there, sitting on top of her well-worn copy of Advanced ASL Structures, was a glittering, impossibly large diamond bracelet. Rose's blood ran cold. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before in my life." "It looks exactly like the one I lost," Brenda said, her voice sharp with mock discovery. "Rose Patterson, you are fired," Davies said, his voice ringing with satisfaction. "I am calling the police. Theft of this magnitude. You'll go to prison." "No, please." Rose was sobbing now, the humiliation and a terror so profound it stole her breath. "Mr. Davies, I didn't. Brenda, she's lying. She put it there." Why would Miss Van Sloan, a woman of her standing, need to frame a nobody like you? Davies scoffed. "Give me your apron. Get out of my sight." He shoved her hard toward the back door. "The police will be at your apartment by morning." Rose stumbled out into the dark alley, the stench of garbage and rain filling her lungs. She was shaking. She had lost her job. She was going to be arrested. She was going to jail. All her dreams, Columbia, Leo's legacy, her small, quiet life, were gone. She sank to her knees on the wet pavement, the business card in her pocket, suddenly feeling like a lead weight. Calling him now would be admitting defeat, proving she was exactly the pathetic, desperate creature Brenda had accused her of being. She had been silenced all over again, and this time there was no one to translate. Rose didn't go home. She couldn't. She walked. She walked for hours, until the pre-dawn light began to stain the New York sky a sickly grey. She ended up on a bench in Central Park, watching the city wake up, feeling utterly and completely hollow. She had $200 in her bank account. Her rent was over $500. She was fired. A thief. She finally pulled out the black card. Her hands were trembling. This was not a social call. This was an SOS. She dialed the number, her heart in her throat. It rang once. "Rose." Marcus Thorne's voice was wide awake, clear and sharp. He hadn't asked who it was. He knew. "Mr. Thorne," she choked out, and the dam broke. The tears came, hot and furious. I'm so sorry to call. I was fired. Mr. Davies. Brenda. She said I stole a bracelet. She planted it in my locker. They're calling the police. I didn't know who else to call. I didn't take it. I swear I didn't." There was a pause on the line, not of disbelief, but of a cold, gathering rage. "Where are you, Rose?" I'm in Central Park, near the East 72nd entrance." "Don't move," he said. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." The line clicked dead. Rose sat, numb. 10 minutes later, a black sedan, sleek and silent as a panther, pulled up to the curb. The back door opened. Marcus Thorne was inside, dressed not in a suit, but in jeans and a dark sweater. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Get in," he said. As she slid onto the soft leather, she saw who was in the other seat. Genevieve Thorne. Genevieve's face was etched with concern. When she saw Rose's tear-streaked face, her expression hardened. She reached across and took Rose's hand, giving it a firm, reassuring squeeze. "Rose," Marcus said, his eyes on the road as the car pulled away. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened." Rose recounted the story: Brenda's arrival, the missing bracelet, Davies's glee, the locker. When she finished, Marcus was silent, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I knew it," he said, his voice a low growl. "I knew she'd do something." "What?" Rose asked. "My mother." Marcus glanced in the rearview mirror at Genevieve, who was watching him intently. He signed a few words to her. "Brenda. Fired. Police." Genevieve's eyes flashed with fury. Marcus continued, "My mother. She's deaf, Rose. She's not blind. In fact, because she can't hear, she sees things other people miss. She's the most observant person I know. She told me, after that dinner, that Brenda was not just cruel, but dangerous, that she had empty eyes." Genevieve tapped her son's shoulder. He pulled over. She got out of the car, retrieved a tablet from the trunk, and got back in, handing it to Rose. On the screen was a video file. "My mother doesn't trust many people," Marcus explained. "She has her own security detail. Not for her, but for me. To watch the people I bring around. When I told her Brenda was going back to the restaurant last night to pick up a forgotten wrap, my mother sent her Man Robert." Genevieve tapped the play button. The video was grainy, dark, and shot from across the street, clearly from a parked car. It showed the alley entrance to Aperture. It showed Brenda Van Sloan, unmistakable under the single light, arriving. But she wasn't alone. She was with Mr. Davies. The camera zoomed in. Brenda was laughing. She reached into her purse and handed Mr. Davies two things: a thick envelope and the glittering diamond bracelet. The video showed Davies taking the items, unlocking the back door and letting himself in, just moments before Brenda walked around to the front to stage her robbery. Rose stared at the screen, her hand over her mouth. They planned it." "Yes," Marcus said, his voice pure ice. "And we are going to let them." He looked at his watch. "The restaurant opens for brunch prep in 30 minutes. He turned the car around, heading straight for Aperture. Rose sat in the back of the silent, gliding sedan, the supple leather cold against her skin. The city was still asleep, the streets cast in the blue, pre-dawn light. Beside her, Genevieve Thorne was a study in stillness, her hands resting in her lap, her profile as sharp and elegant as a figure on a Roman coin. Marcus drove, his grip on the wheel the only outward sign of the cold, tightly coiled rage radiating from him. The tablet, with its damning video, lay on the center console. "He's been there for 8 years, Rose whispered, breaking the silence. She was thinking of Mr. Davies, of the casual, daily cruelties he'd inflicted on the staff. He was awful to everyone, especially the busboys. He called them his unspeakables because their English wasn't perfect." Marcus met her eyes in the rearview mirror. His were not the restless, agitated eyes of the man in the restaurant. They were the eyes of a general planning a campaign. "And Brenda?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "How long have you known her?" I hadn't," Rose admitted, looking at her hands. "I just knew who she was from the magazines. She's one of your people, from your world." "She was," Marcus corrected. The word hung in the air, final. "She was a convenience, a suitable escort. My world, as you call it, is full of them. People who see life as a series of transactions, who see people as transactions." He turned a corner, the car never wavering. "My father was like that. He saw my mother's deafness not as a condition, but as a flaw in his acquisition. He hid her away. After he died, I thought I was different. I thought by giving her the best, by protecting her, I was loving her. He glanced at his mother. She was watching him, her expression unreadable. You, he said, his gaze shifting back to Rose. Walked in and proved in 30 seconds that I've been doing it wrong for 20 years. I wasn't protecting her. I was just managing her. Like Davies. Like Brenda. Like my father. This confession, so raw and unexpected, stunned Rose. She looked at Genevieve, who then raised her hands, her movements quick and sharp. Rose's mind, still fogged with fear and adrenaline, automatically translated. Tell him he's not his father. Tell him he's just a slow learner. A small, choked laugh escaped Marcus. She's right. He pulled the car to the curb a block away from Aperture, the alley entrance just visible. The sky was now a bruised purple. He killed the engine. The silence returned, but this time it was expectant. All right, Marcus said, turning in his seat to face Rose. This is your story, Rose, not mine. I can handle this a dozen ways. I can call my lawyers. I can have Davies and Brenda arrested quietly. The video is all the proof we need. But that's my way. It's clean, it's corporate, and it's silent. It's what I've always done. He leaned in. But I have a feeling that's not justice. You were humiliated. You were thrown out in the alley. So I ask you, what do you want to do? Rose looked at him, truly seeing the man behind the myth. He wasn't offering to save her. He was offering her the choice. She looked at Genevieve, who was watching her with an intense, supportive, and almost fierce look. Rose thought of Leo. She thought of how he would shrink when people yelled at him, as if he could feel the vibrations of their anger. She thought of how he'd been dismissed his whole life, and she thought of how she, in her grief, had let herself be dismissed too. She started, her voice a whisper. She cleared her throat. She sat up straighter. I was fired in that kitchen. I was thrown out that back door. I want to walk back in. I want him. I want them to see me. A slow, wolfish smile spread across Marcus's face. Good, because I'm in the mood for brunch. He glanced at his mother, signing a quick, simple phrase. Phase 1? Genevieve nodded, a glint in her eye. Phase 1. Marcus turned back to Rose. My mother, as you've gathered, is a brilliant strategist. She's been setting this board for a week. She knew Brenda's type. She knew Brenda was jealous of the attention I was paying. Well, to my new business. He tapped the tablet. But she wasn't just testing Brenda. She was testing me. The bracelet, Rose said, the pieces clicking into place. It was a trap. It was bait, Marcus corrected. My mother lost it a week ago at the restaurant. She told Brenda, who, of course, offered to help find it, all while knowing she'd never look. My mother then, let's say, ensured Mr. Davies found it and put it in the lost and found. She knew Brenda would see it as an opportunity. She just didn't know what kind. When you showed up, Rose, you gave Brenda the motive. She wasn't just stealing a bracelet. She was eliminating a rival. She thought I was her rival. Rose was aghast. You were the first person in years who had my undivided attention, Marcus said simply. That made you a threat. So, Rose said, her mind racing. The video. Her man, Robert. He was watching Davies? No, Marcus said, his smile widening. He was watching Brenda. We knew she was coming back. We just didn't know why. Davies just implicated himself. He was a bonus. Genevieve raised her hands again, her movements sharp. Enough talk. It's time. She's right, Marcus said. Aperture opens for prep in 5 minutes. Davies will be there, feeling rich. Rose, you first. We'll be right behind you. What do I say? Rose asked, her courage faltering. You'll know, Marcus said. Just remember, you're not a waitress anymore. You're the only person in the room who knows the full truth. Rose took a deep breath. She looked at the grimy alley door. She had been thrown out of it, sobbing. She was about to walk back in, flanked by the most powerful family in the city. Her heart was hammering, but for the first time in her life, it wasn't from fear. It was from power. The back of house was a cacophony of steam, clanging metal, and shouted Spanish. The kitchen staff, who had always been kind to Rose, barely looked up. They were prepping for the brunch rush. Carlos, the headline cook, was searing off racks of lamb, a bead of sweat on his brow. Rose pushed open the door. The clanging stopped. One by one, the prep cooks, the bus boys, the dishwashers, they all turned and stared. To them, she was a ghost. She was the girl who had been accused of theft, the one Davies had gleefully exposed during the pre-shift meeting as a common criminal. Carlos wiped his hands on his apron, his face a mixture of pity and confusion. Rosita, what are you doing here? Davies, he said you were arrested? Rose's voice was low, but it cut through the hiss of the steam tables. He was mistaken. The kitchen doors swung open, and Mr. Davies strode in, his face red with self-importance, his cheap suit freshly pressed. He was holding a clipboard, ready to bark out the day's orders. "Line up!" he shouted, not looking up. "We have a VIP party at noon, the entire mezzanine. It's Marcus Thorne. He's coming in early for a private meeting with me. So, I want this kitchen spotless. I want—" He finally looked up and saw her. His face, which had been ruddy, went a stark, papery white. "You!" he hissed, his eyes darting to the other staff. "You have an incredible nerve. I told you, I called the police. You're trespassing. Get out! Get out before I have you thrown out again." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her old uniform. Rose didn't flinch. She just looked at his hand, and then back at his face. "Take your hand off me, Mr. Davies," she said. Her voice wasn't a whisper. It was a command. It was so steady and so cold that he actually recoiled, snatching his hand back as if he'd been burned. I am the manager," he stammered, his bravado crumbling into bluster. "You are a thief! You stole from Miss Van Sloan. I have proof. I found the bracelet." "No, you didn't," Rose said, taking a step toward him. The entire kitchen staff was frozen, watching the drama unfold. "You were given the bracelet, in the alley, in an envelope, along with $5,000 in cash." The color drained from Davies's face. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. That's a lie. That's a slanderous accusation." "Is it?" asked a new voice. The kitchen door swung open again. This time it was Marcus Thorne. He was not dressed for brunch. He was dressed for war. He stood framed in the doorway, and the entire kitchen seemed to suck in its breath. Beside him, radiating a quiet, icy fury, was Genevieve. "Mr. Thorne," Davies sputtered, his entire demeanor shifting. He became a fawning, panicked mess. "Sir, welcome. I was just handling this trespasser. She's a former employee, a thief. I was just about to call the police again." "Don't bother," Marcus said, his voice dangerously calm. He took a step into the kitchen, his eyes sweeping over the stainless steel, the simmering pots, and finally landing on Davies. "I have them on speed dial." He walked past Rose, placing himself between her and Davies, a subtle, protective gesture. "Mr. Davies, I believe you have something that belongs to my mother." Your mother?" Davies was sweating profusely now, his eyes darting between Marcus and Genevieve. "Sir, I have no idea what you're talking about. Unless you mean the bracelet. The one she stole. He pointed a trembling finger at Rose. This one? Marcus asked, and from his jacket pocket he produced the glittering, priceless diamond bracelet. It flashed under the harsh fluorescent lights. Davies's jaw went slack. That was the bracelet. He'd put it in the locker himself. If Marcus had it, then... How? How? Marcus echoed. We're in a restaurant, Mr. Davies. Let's talk about the menu. Specifically, last night's special. It was a 2-person dish, a conspiracy, if you will. The main ingredient was this bracelet. The appetizer was $5,000 in cash, and the garnish was framing a 24-year-old girl to cover your tracks. I don't. You don't, Marcus said, his patience snapping. He pulled out the tablet and held it up. He didn't even have to press play. The paused image was crystal clear. Mr. Davies in the alley, his hand outstretched, taking the bracelet and the envelope from Brenda. A collective gasp went up from the kitchen staff. Carlos swore softly in Spanish. Davies looked at the screen, and the last of his strength left him. His shoulders slumped. He was a man utterly, completely, and publicly destroyed. "Get out," Marcus said. The words were quiet, but they had the force of a tidal wave. "Mr. Thorne, please," Davies begged, his voice a pathetic whine. I needed the money. She said you'd be grateful, that you'd see me as a fixer." "I see you as what you are," Marcus said. "A petty bully and a criminal. You didn't just participate in a frame-up. You've been skimming from the register for a year, and you've been padding the produce invoices." That, more than anything, shocked Davies. "How?" "I own the building, Mr. Davies," Marcus said flatly. "As of an hour ago, Thorne Industries holds the lease to this entire city block. I wasn't just coming here for brunch. I was coming to review the books. You just made my job easier." He gestured to the door. "Your apron, your keys, leave them on the counter, and get out. My security will escort you from the premises." Davies, humiliated, his face a mask of purple-splotched rage, tore off his clip-on tie and his manager's name tag. He threw them on the prep counter, where they landed with a wet clatter next to a row of butchered chickens. He gave Rose one last look of pure, unadulterated hatred, and then, to the dead silent kitchen, he turned and walked out the back door, the same one he'd thrown Rose out of. A beat passed, then another. Then Carlos, the line cook, started to clap. Slowly, tentatively, the rest of the kitchen staff joined in. It wasn't a loud ovation. It was a quiet, steady, respectful applause. Not for Marcus, but for Rose. Rose stood, shaking, as Marcus turned to her. "You okay?" She nodded, wiping a tear from her eye. "I am." "Good," Marcus said, "because we're not done. Phase 2. As if on cue, the front doors of the restaurant swung open. "Marcus, darling," Brenda Van Sloan's voice, a high musical trill, echoed across the empty dining room. She was a vision in a white Chanel brunch suit, her hair a perfect blonde helmet. She was holding 2 mimosas she'd clearly charmed from the bartender. She was here for her victory lap. She glided across the room, her smile bright, and then she saw the tableau. Marcus, standing by the kitchen. Genevieve, watchful and silent. And Rose? Brenda's smile faltered for only a fraction of a second, but Rose saw it. "Rose, dear," Brenda said, her voice dripping with faux pity. She set the mimosas down. "Still here? Oh my goodness. Did you come to apologize before they take you downtown? That's very brave of you. Marcus, you should have told me. We could have, I don't know, paid for her bus fare." She walked over and looped her arm through Marcus's, pressing herself against his side. "Darling, This is all so tawdry. Let's get out of here. Let's go to the club. Marcus didn't move. He didn't look at her. He looked at Rose. Rose, Marcus said, his voice clear. Tell me, what did Miss Van Sloan just say? Brenda looked confused. Marcus, what are you? I'm right here. I'm not talking to you, Brenda, Marcus said. I'm talking to my translator. Rose's heart leapt into her throat. She understood. This was her stage. She said this is tawdry, Rose said, her voice gaining strength. She said she wants to go to the club. I see, Marcus said. He gently, almost clinically, removed Brenda's arm from his. Brenda, I'd like you to meet Rose Patterson. She's not a waitress. She's a specialist in linguistics. I'm consulting with her. Consulting? Brenda's laugh was sharp. Consulting on what? How to polish silver? No, Marcus said. On my mother. He turned to Genevieve, who stepped forward. The power in the room had just shifted, drawn to the silent woman. Genevieve looked at Brenda, not with hatred, but with a cool, analytical assessment, as if she were studying an insect. Then her hands moved. They were no longer the hesitant, rusty hands from the first dinner. They were fluid, precise, and utterly scathing. The signs were so fast, so complex, that only a native speaker could follow. Brenda, of course, saw nothing but a mute woman waving her hands. Marcus, what is she doing? It's unsettling. What is she doing, Rose? Marcus asked. Rose took a deep breath. She was the voice. She was the translator. She was the power. Mrs. Thorne, Rose said, her voice ringing out in the silent restaurant, would like to know if you enjoyed the gift she gave Mr. Davies. Brenda's face froze. The blood drained from it. I don't... Genevieve's hands flew again. She says, Rose translated, that she's not surprised you were so clumsy, that you've always been empty. That's the sign she used. Empty. She says you see people, but you don't observe them. Marcus, make her stop, Brenda shrieked, her composure shattering. This is insane. She's she's my mother, Marcus said, his voice like ice, and she's not finished. Genevieve's hands moved one last time. It was a slower, more deliberate set of signs. She was telling a story. Rose watched, her eyes wide, and then she looked at Brenda, whose face was a mask of terror. Mrs. Thorne says, she says the bracelet was a test, but not for you. Rose's voice was quiet. It was a test for her son. She said her husband, Marcus's father, was a man who surrounded himself with beautiful, empty, and cruel people. He mistook silence for weakness. She was testing Marcus to see if he was as blind as his father, to see if he would choose a shiny, hollow thing. Rose looked at Brenda, over something real. The entire room was silent. Brenda was shaking. She looked at Marcus, desperate. Marcus, baby, you don't believe this, do you? It's her. She pointed at Rose. This witch. She's putting words in her mouth. She's lying. Am I? Rose asked. And for the first time, Genevieve Thorne spoke. Her voice was a low, unused and gravelly thing. It was a sound that had not been heard in public for decades. It was just one word. No. The sound, so unexpected, made Brenda physically jump. Genevieve stepped forward. She took the bracelet from Marcus. She walked past Brenda, as if she weren't even there. She walked right up to Rose. Rose was trembling, tears welling in her eyes. Mrs. Thorne, Genevieve smiled. It was the first true, radiant smile Rose had ever seen from her. She took Rose's small, chapped wrist, and with a gesture of profound, symbolic weight, she clasped the heavy, priceless diamond bracelet around it. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't a paycheck. It was a coronation. Brenda let out a small, strangled sound. She had been rendered speechless, invisible, and irrelevant. She had been silenced. Without another word, she turned. Her walk was no longer a glide. It was a stumble. She pushed open the heavy glass doors of Aperture and fled into the morning light, her white suit a beacon of her utter humiliation. Rose stood in the middle of the restaurant, the impossible weight of the diamonds on her arm. The kitchen staff had slowly emerged and were now quietly fixing brunch. For her, for Marcus, for Genevieve. I can't accept this, Rose whispered, fumbling with the clasp. You can, Marcus said gently. And you will, at least until we can get it to a bank. Rose, it's not a gift. It's a retainer. Rose looked at him, confused. I wasn't entirely lying to Brenda, Marcus said. I am consulting with you. He gestured to a table, the one where it had all started. They sat. A moment later, Carlos brought 3 cups of coffee. For 20 years, Marcus said, I've been trying to fix my mother's silence. I've hired the best doctors, the best therapists. I've donated to research. I've tried everything. I've been trying to make her hear. He looked at Genevieve, who was sipping her coffee, her eyes bright. You, he said to Rose, were the first person who didn't try to fix her. You just spoke to her, in her own language. You didn't see a problem to be solved. You saw a person to be heard. He slid a thick, formal contract across the table. I've been throwing money at a ghost, Rose. I need to start throwing it at a solution. The Thorn Foundation's philanthropic branch is effective, but it's cold. It has no voice. Rose looked at the cover page. It read, Proposal for the Leo Patterson Center for Deaf Advocacy and Linguistic Studies. She looked up, her hand over her mouth, her eyes flooding. Leo, my brother. His name, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. I want to build a place that honors his name. A place that doesn't just help the deaf, but advocates for them. A place that teaches people the power of language, all language. I need someone to run it, someone to build it from the ground up. I need a director. I need a partner. Rose was openly weeping now, silent tears streaming down her face. She looked at the contract, at the salary line, which was more money than she could comprehend. She looked at the clause that included a full, paid-for scholarship to complete her master's and PhD at Columbia. She looked at Marcus, the billionaire who had just offered her a new life. And then she looked at Genevieve, the woman who had, in her own way, saved them both. Genevieve was smiling, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. She saw Rose watching. She set the cup down. She raised her hand. One simple, perfect sign. Partner? Rose Patterson, the girl who had been invisible, the girl who had been silenced, looked at her own hands, one still chapped from work, the other sparkling with diamonds. She had found her voice. And now she was about to use it to change the world. She wiped her tears, a broad, brilliant smile breaking across her face. She signed back, her movement firm and confident. Partner. And just like that, Rose's entire world changed. She wasn't a shy waitress anymore. She was the director of a foundation, giving a voice to thousands, just like her brother, Leo. It just goes to show that the thing you're most afraid of, the thing that makes you feel weak or invisible, like Rose's shyness, is often hiding your greatest strength. The world told her to be quiet, but her silence was a language all its own. What did you think of Rose's story? What about Genevieve's incredible twist? If you loved this story and want to see more dramas where the underdog finally gets their day, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And share this video with someone who needs a good story. Most importantly, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. We have so many more stories to tell, and I don't want you to miss a single one. Thank you for listening.